Begin today the Gemara on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, 7 lines up from the bottom of the Amud, where it says Tosh Shema. The Gemara before brought a machlokes between Abaye and Rava regarding a person that wants to dig a pit right at the border of his property, and his friend, the neighbor, doesn't have any pit there. So when you're digging, seemingly you're not damaging yet anything that he has in his property. If later your neighbor's going to want to dig a pit as well, now your pit that's on the border will weaken his pit that he wants to dig there. But at this point, there's no issue, l'chayra. So Abaye says, Saimich, you can dig right there on the border. Rava says, even in such a case, Ein Saimich, you're not allowed to dig right at the border of the property, even if you're the one that's coming first. And the Gemara before brought two versions to this machlokes, whether they're arguing in a case of a field that's not usually used for digging pits in it. So over there's an argument whether you can come first and dig on the border. Or then the Gemara says, even they could be arguing even by a sada ha'asuya lita. Even there by a sada that's made, or asuya l'bayis that is, a sada that's made to dig pits, even there they're arguing. Okay, the Gemara before brought the details about this. So here, the Gemara brings a question on Abaye's opinion that says that you're allowed to be saimich. If you're coming first, you can dig the pit near your friend's property. So Tashema, Sela, Haba, Biyadayim. If you have sand or a rock that if you pick up in your hands, it crumbles. A very earth that's very, very soft and crumbles. So you have one person, neighbors, one digs his pit from one side of the border, and the other digs on the other side of the border. But the one that digs on one side, he comes first and he's digging there first, but yet he has to distance from the border 3 tvachim, and then he has to put up proper plaster in his pit so they shouldn't weaken any of the earth of his friend's property. And the same with the other. He has to dig, he has to distance 3 tvachim and put up plaster. So you clearly see here, the Brisa spells out that zeh and zeh, the first one and the second one, both of them have to distance from the neighbor's property. So you see over here clearly that you're not allowed to be saimach, like Rava said. Answers the Gemara, Ba biyadayim shani. This Brisa is different. It clearly spells out, we're talking about a sela ba biyadayim, because we're talking about earth that's very soft and crumbles. In such a case, even if you're coming first, you're going to be softening, you're going to be damaging your friend's property. In this case, everybody would agree that it's a problem. And the Gemara asks on this, the answer and the explanation of this Brisa is so obvious that what was the one that brought this as a question on Rava even thinking to ask? The Brisa itself spells out, Sela, Haba biyadayim, that because this is an area where the earth is very soft, so therefore you shouldn't dig too close to your friend's property. And says the Gemara, the one that asked the question thought that really the halacha applies even by a regular nature of earth, regular condition, even when it's not this soft. And Elamai, the Brisa mentions that that the earth is soft because there's a chiddush in that. Because otherwise, I would think to say, Kivin the that because this is something which crumbles and is so soft, maybe you should have to actually distance more than 3 tvachim. In the Mishnah, it said that you have to distance 3 tvachim. Maybe here you have to distance even more. Kamash Malon, that's why this Brisa wants to add. You would think that maybe the Brisa is just adding a chiddush, that it's enough to distance only 3 tvachim, even though it's very soft earth. That's why he was thinking to ask from here on Abaye's opinion. Okay, now the Gemara continues here to ask all the Tashamas that the Gemara is going to bring. The next daf over here is all going to be questions on Rava. Right? So Rava is the one that says that even if you're coming first, you can't dig a pit near your friend's property. So from the Mishnah, from the Mishnais later in this Pedic, the you see constantly, it always mentions that the issue is that you came second. So Tashama, what did it say in our Mishnah? The first Mishnah in the Pedic. You have to distance gefes, which is the leftovers of olive press. These are things that all produce heat and therefore could damage someone's wall. So you have to distance gefes or zevel, menor, v'samelach or salt, v'sasid, lime, v'sasloim, flintstones, mikaislei shel chavere, from your friend's wall. Gimel tvachim, 3 tvachim, oisad b'sid, or you put up plaster to protect that it shouldn't cause any damage. So what do you see from the lashon of the Mishnah? Taimidike kaisel. The Mishnah is saying you have to distance all these things from his wall. So only if he already built a wall there, so now you have to distance 3 tvachim. Oh, leka kaisel. But if there's no wall there, saimech. So then you're allowed to put all these things that produce heat right up to the border, and it's not a problem. If you come first, you can put it there. So it's a question on Rava that said that ain't a saimech, you're digging a pit, you're not allowed to dig near your friend's border. Taisus over here explains that even though Rava said as halacha regarding a pit, And the Gemara before said, when you dig a pit, it softens his ground. So over here, regarding these things, you're coming first and you're putting these things down there. It's not like digging a pit. It's not the same kind of thing. Who says you can compare them? So Taisa says that no, even over here in this case, when you put down these kind of things, it does cause a certain damage to the other person's property right away when you put them down there. And also Taisa says another point, that once you put them down there, now the other person wants to go ahead and build a wall, and he's going to ask you to move it away in order not to damage his wall. You're not going to move it away right away, and he's going to have to wait for you to move it away in order for him to be able to build a wall. So according to Rava, you have to distance in order not to ruin his wall. Even in this case, it should also apply. So the Gemara answers, and here the answer the Gemara is going to give here to this Mishnah is going to be basically the same kind of answer that it gives to most of the questions that it asks in the rest of the Yomid here. And the pshat is as follows: Loi, that's not how you understand the Mishnah according to Rava. Kileke kaisel, even if your neighbor does not have a wall yet, nami loy samech. You're not allowed to put these kind of things that could cause a damage near his field or his property. Velamai kamashmalon. So then why does the Mishnah say that don't put it near his wall? The Mishnah is explaining you the reason. That the reason why you shouldn't put these things near his property is because they produce heat and they can weaken a person's wall. So it's just giving you the reasoning, the background, the explanation of why you shouldn't do it. But it's not telling you that that's the actual halacha only if he has a kaisel. Even if he didn't build a wall yet, these are kinds of things that could cause damage to a kaisel, and therefore you shouldn't put them near his property. Tashema, same thing. The Gemara says, what does it say in the continuation of the Mishnah? You should distance your plantings or v'samachresha, where you plow your field, v'smeraglayim, or urine, menakaisel, from a person's wall, shloishet tvachim, 3 tvachim. So again, it seems like taime dekakaisel. You have to distance it only because he already has a wall up there. Aleka kaisel, but if there's no wall yet, samach, you're allowed to put these things near your friend's property. So the Gemara answers, loy, kileke kaisel, nami le samach. Even if he doesn't have a wall up yet, you're not allowed to put these things near his property. Velo mai kamashmalon. What is the Mishnah saying when it says because he has a kaisel there? It's giving you the reason. It's explaining. Ha kamashmalon de matunte. All these things that are moisture, kasher le kaisel. They're not good for the wall. And that includes also zrayim. When you planting, you have to water the plants, and therefore there's always moisture there. And plowing or even planting, there's moisture, so therefore it's going to weaken the other person's wall. Tashema, what did it say in the continuation of the Mishnah? That you have to distance your mill, gimel, and it's to be 3 tvachim in ashechev from the lower stone of the mill, which is wider, shein daled min harechev, which will be 4 tvachim from the upper stone of the mill, which is narrower, so it'll be 4 tvachim of a distance. And it says there in the Mishnah that you have to distance from the wall. That's what the Mishnah there says. So now the question is, taime deke kaisel. The only reason you have to distance it is because of the fact that he has a wall there. Haleka kaisel, but it seems that if he does not have a wall, samech, you are allowed to put your mill right up to the border. And says the Gemara, loy, kileka kaisel nami le samech. Even if your neighbor has no wall, you're not allowed to put it up by the border. Velamai kamashbalon, ha kamashbalon. The Mishnah is coming to explain the reason, the tiraya kasher le kaisel. The reverberations of your mill are not good for a wall. Toshema, then the Mishnah said, the last halach of the Mishnah, ve'satana, if you have an oven. This is the oven they had in those times, which was made from an earthenware, and it had a base of stones that was wide, and then on top of it they built this earthenware oven. So shloisham and akalia, from the kalia, which is the base, which is wider. So it has to be distanced 3 tfachim from that. Shein daled min hasofa, which is 4 tfachim from the upper part of the oven. So then the Mishnah says you have to distance this from the other person's wall. That's how the Mishnah, it's a continuation of what the Mishnah said before, mina kaisel, all from that in order not to ruin his wall. So taime deke kaisel. So it seems like the problem is because you're near the other person's wall. Haleke kaisel, but if there's no wall, samech, then you can put it right near his property. And says the Gemara, loy, that's not the case. Kileke kaisel nami loy samech, even if he does not have a wall, you're also not allowed to put it near his property. Elamai kamashmalon. So what is the Mishnah here saying when it says because of his wall? Ha kamashmalon. The Mishnah is coming to give the reason, the havla kasha lakaisel, that it's the heat of your oven that is going to be hard. It's going to ruin his wall. Tashema. Okay, this is until here we had all the rayas from the Mishnah that we learned already in the beginning of the Pedic. Now the Gemara brings from Mishnayos from later on here in the Pedic. So the Mishnah says la yiftach adam chanus shel nachtaymin. You're not allowed to open up a store as a baker or v'shel tzaboin, or a dyer, and a baker has ovens that are always baking, and there's a lot of heat. And a tzaboin, a person that's a dyer, has the pot of the dye, always a lot of fire and heat. Now that I'll open this up, if you're on the bottom floor under your friend that lives upstairs and he has a storehouse of wheat or whatever it is, because the heat that you have will damage what he's trying to store upstairs. Or v'loy refes bakar, you're not allowed to open a refes bakar, a barn in the bottom floor, if your neighbor upstairs is trying to store things that the bad odor of your barn downstairs is going to ruin the things that he's trying to store upstairs. So now what do you see from that Mishnah? What it's telling you is, if your neighbor upstairs, already before you wanted to open your bakery downstairs, he already had the storage upstairs, therefore now you're not allowed to come after him and open up your bakery, that your heat will then damage his storage. But if your neighbor upstairs had no storage yet of it, you're allowed to open up your bakery downstairs. And then the neighbor upstairs, if after that he wants to make a storage, he can't tell you that the heat that comes from your ovens, from your bakery, is a problem for me. So here you see also a question on Rava, that if you're coming first, you're allowed to open your bakery downstairs. Now here the Gemara actually gives a different kind of answer. The Gemara could have gave the same answer like it says before, that really even if you want to open a bakery first, it's not allowed. Elamai, the Mishnah is just telling you the reason. Why aren't you allowed to open up a bakery downstairs? Because you have a neighbor upstairs. You're limiting him. Now he won't be able to store anything upstairs. But the Gemara actually says that over here there's a different answer. Dira Shani. When it's in your house, it's a place that you live in your house, that's different. Over here, you have the rights in your house to use it for whatever you want, if the person upstairs does not have yet any storage there. This is before we were talking about in the field and a property outdoors. Over there it's different. But inside your house, if you're coming first, you're allowed to, even Rava would agree, you can use it for what you want. I'll prove to you this point, that over here regarding this indoors in your house downstairs, it's different, because the Tani Allah regarding this case, it says in a Braise, im haisa refes bakar kidemis la'oitzer. So here the Braise clearly says that if the barn that the person has downstairs comes before the storage upstairs, mutter, then it's allowed. So we don't see this, it doesn't say this in any Braise regarding any of the other cases that we had in the Mishnah, in the first Mishnah, and another Mishnah, is that if you're first, it's allowed. It never spells that out. Specifically here regarding this case, when you're in a house, the Braise says that if you're coming first, you can bring your barn in, or you can bring your bakery in. And so you clearly see that inside a dira it's different. Tashamad, another Mishnah here later in this Pedic. Layita Adam Ilon Samach Lisada. You're not allowed to plant your tree near another person's field. Elam Kain Hichik Mimenu Dalad Amis, unless you distance from him 4 Amis. So what this is talking about is, you have your trees, really it's talking about a vineyard. You want to plant your vineyard near another person's field where he grows his wheat. You have to be marchik from him 4 Amis. What's the reason for this? V'tani Allah. So in a Braisa we learned the reason is Dalad Amis Shamru, the 4 Amis that you have to distance from your vineyard to his field that grows grain. Kedei Aveda Sakerem. In order for you to have space for the work that you have to do in your vineyard. In order to do the work in your vineyard, you have to be able to plow, or you have to be able to come around with a wagon to collect the grapes and load up the grapes into your wagon. If you're going to have your vineyard right near his field, so then you're going to end up going with your wagon into his field. So therefore you have to distance 4 Amas. So what do we see from this Mishnah? Taime mishum kedei aveda sakerem. The only reason you have to distance from him is because now that he has his field there and he has his grain growing, so you have to be able to go in. You have to be able to go there with your wagon. Holav mishum kedei aveda sakerem. But if it's not for this that you have to be able to go there with your wagon, samich, you're allowed to plant your vineyard straight up to the border. Now, what's the chiddush here? What's the question on Rava? The afal gav, the ikish roshin, the kamaski. Even though there are the roots of the vineyard that goes into the other person's field, and if he wants to plant the wheat in his field, he's going to have a problem with your roots. So you see over here that if you're coming first and you're planting your vineyard, you're allowed to plant it all the way up to the water, even though your roots are going into his field. Answers the Gemara, Hacha b'ma yaskinon. What is that Mishnah talking about? The mafsik tzunme, that there's a rock. There's a rock that's separating between your vineyard and his field, which means that the roots don't pass over. That's not an issue. Usually, whenever the Mishnah, we'll see later in the Pedicare, discusses planting a tree near your friend's field, what's the issue always? The roots that spread. But over here, the fact that the Braisa clearly says that the only issue is the Avedis Akerem, the fact that you have to have space to go around with your wagon and not to go into your friend's property, it must be that what we're talking about over here is that the roots are not an issue. There's a rock that's blocking the roots. Says the Gemara, Dekanami, I'll prove this to you, the Ketani, it says afterwards, Hoya Geder Bintayim, if there is a gate between them, or the Geder Bintayim, Rashi actually points out, it doesn't have to be a proper wall. The Geder Bintayim over here is, even if you have a fence which is made up of a Tzuras HaPesach, between the two properties, you put up like a pole on one side, pole on another side, and then this kind of gather that you have between them, then zeh saimich legeder mikan, v'zeh saimich legeder mikan. So then the one that's planting his vineyard could plant all the way up to the border, and the other could also plant all the way his grain all the way up to the border. So what do you see over here? If the issue is the roots, what does this gather help? What does it help the fact that you put up some kind of partition over here between them? Under the ground, there's an issue that the roots are going through. Elamai, it must be that over here, this Mishnah is not dealing with roots. That's not the issue over here. The issue could be the Avedis HaKerem, or the issue could be Kalayim, that your Kerem could spread and cause Kalayim. So if you put up this Tzuras HaPesach, you put up this gather in between, so there won't be an issue of the Avedis HaKerem, or there won't be an issue of Kalayim. So the Gemara asks, but if that's the pshat, in the Sefer there, it clearly does talk about roots. Oh, you should of if your roots go out and are coming out in your friend's field, so then your friend, when he wants to plant his grain and he's plowing his field and your roots came into his field, so he can plow 3 tvachim deep and then take away and uproot your roots that came into his field. Right, and according to Rashi, that's because the one that planted the vineyard, he came here, he wasn't allowed to plant over here his vineyard to allow his roots to go into your field. So now when he plows, he's allowed to uproot your roots. So we clearly see here that the Mishnah is talking about the fact that his roots are spreading into your field. If you just said and proved from the beginning of the Mishnah and from what it says in it in the Braisa that over here the issue is just Avedis HaKerem, or that you could put up a partition in between, and there's a tzulmeh. So either mafsik tzulmeh. So my boy Yehosam, what are the roots? So the Bach had there, my boy Sharoshan Hasam. What are these roots doing here? That's the Gemara. There's 2 parts to this Mishnah. The Mishnah, the Hachikama, this is how you're supposed to learn it. The first part of the Mishnah is dealing with a case where there's no issue of roots. It's just the issue of Avedis HaKerem or Kelayim, that you have to have that space, that distance, not to go into your friend's property in that way. And then the next part of the Mishnah is saying, Hachikama, v'hi lav tzunmeh, if it's a place where there's no rock that separates between the properties, and then v'hoyu sharoshav yaitzin l'teich shachaveiroi. So now when you plant your vineyard here, your roots are going into your friend's property. So then, ma'imik shloisha tvachim kedei shelo yakev ha'machreisha. So then your friend is allowed to dig, he's allowed to plow 3 tvachim deep and uproot your roots that go into his property. Toshima, another ayah the Gemara asks, and this is a whole question on Rava that says that if you come first, that you're not allowed to be saimech to your friend's property, even if you're first. So the Mishnah says later, you have to distance your tree from your friend's pit, esrim v'chamish amet, 25 amas. That's how far the roots of a tree spread and can root your friend's pit. So what do you see? That the case over here is that your friend already had a pit there before you planted your tree. Your friend already had a pit there. So therefore you're not allowed to plant your tree too close to his boy. Oh, like a boy. But if there was no pit there yet, you're allowed to plant your tree close to his property, even more closer than 25 amas. Answers the Gemara, loy, that's not the pshat. Kileke boy, nami loy samech. Even if your friend doesn't have a pit there yet, you're not allowed to plant your tree too close to ruin it, to take away his ability to dig a pit there. But v'hakamashmalon, the Mishnah there is explaining the reason behind it, as we said before, the ad chofei ameh, to the distance of 25 ames, Ozli Sharoshim Umaski Lebar. That's how far the roots of a tree spread and they ruin the walls of your friend's pit. So it's coming to explain the reason of why and how far you have to go because of what it does. But if this is the case, What does that Mishnah say afterwards? Ve'im ilon kodam, that if you planted a tree there first, the Mishnah clearly says, if you came and planted your tree first, lo yakutz, so now you don't have to cut off your tree. But the question is, if according to Rava, you're not allowed to plant your tree there first. Doesn't make a difference. Even if you come first, you're not allowed to plant it within 25 amos of his property. So how is this case? What are we saying? That if you had the right and you came first, then you don't have to move away your tree. You never have the right to plant a tree near your friend's property. Answers the Gemara. The case is K'da Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa, we'll see soon, said regarding another thing, b'lekeach. The case is when you had a lekeach. The case of a lekeach is, if this property, there was one big property that was owned by one person, and then this person decided he wants to divide the property, and he's selling half of the property to someone else. And in the middle of this property, there was a tree that he planted there by heter, because it was all his big property. So now he plants this tree, and then he splits the property, and now your friend in that property that you sold him wants to dig a pit. So in such a case, Hachanami, just like Rav Papa answers this regarding another thing over here as well, we're talking about a case where when you planted the tree here, you weren't planting near your friend's property, it was all your property. It's in that case that it's saying that now, even after your friend wants to dig a pit there, you don't have to move away your tree. But in a case where there was neighbors, and you want to plant a tree, you're never allowed to plant your tree near your friend's property, even if you're coming first. Tashema, the Gemara says, there's another Mishnah later that, let's bring a raya here, a question under of it. Marchiken es hamishra min hayerek, you have to distance a mishra, which is a place that's used to soak flax in it. Or min hayerek, you have to distance that from your friend's vegetables. Or vesakreshim min abetzalim, you have to distance your leek that you plant from onions, because it ruins his onions. Or vesachardel, you have to distance your mustard seeds that you have planted, min advairim, from another person's bees. If a person has bees that produce honey, so you have to distance your chardel from your mustard from his bees. And the reason is, Rashi explains, what happens is the bees that eat from this person's, or they go to the seeds, to the mustard seeds, their mouth becomes very bitter, and then they come back and they eat up all their honey. So you have these bees here to produce honey, and because now you planted your mustard right near his bees, the bees are going to end up eating up all the honey, and they're not going to produce the honey. Okay, so now what do we see from here? So this Mishnah is saying, in all these cases, you have to distance from your neighbor that already has his things there. Time the ikke yerek. It's saying that you have to distance your flax that you're soaking because he already has vegetables there, and it's causing damage to his vegetables. Haleke yerek, but if he has no vegetables there, samich, you're allowed to put the soaking of your flax near his property. So the Gemara answers, we can say, like we said before, ki leke yerek nami le samich. Even if he doesn't have his vegetables there yet, you're also not allowed to put your soaking of your flax too close to his property. But the Mishnah there is explaining the reason, the hani, kosher, ahadodi, it's explaining that these things are not good for one another, whether the flax is not good for the vegetables, or the leek is not good for the onions, or the mustard seeds are not going to be good for the other person's bees that are there. Yachi, so the Gemara now says, but if this is the pshat that you're saying here, aim is seifa. What does it say in the seifa of that Mishnah? Rabbi Yosi mate bechardel. Rabbi Yosi says that you are allowed to put your mustard seeds, plant them, and leave them near the other person's property. Why? Even though the other person has bees, and your mustard seeds causes damage to the honey that he's trying to produce with his bees. Because the one with the mustard seeds could say to the one that has the bees, you're telling me that you should distance your mustard seeds from my bees because they cause damage to the production of the honey. You should distance your bees from my mustard seeds. Why? Your bees are coming and eating up the legluge. Legluge, according to some, means the flowers of my mustard seeds, or the seeds, or according to Taisus, legluge just means the branches of the mustard seed. They're coming and damaging me as well. So I don't have to go away from here. You should move away. So Rabbi Yosi is basically arguing. So what we see over here is 2 points. First of all, Rabbi Yosi is arguing on the Tanakama, but he's not arguing regarding all cases. Rabbi Yosi is arguing specifically regarding the bees and the mustard seeds. And over here, Rabbi Yosi is saying you can't demand of the one that has the mustard seeds here, right near his friend's property, to move away from his bees, because just like I'm a mazik, with my mustard seeds that's ruining the production of your honey. Your bees are also eating up from my mustard seeds as well. So you're being mazik me. So I don't have to move away from here. That's what Rabbi Yossi argues here. So now the Gemara says, if we're going to say that this Mishnah goes like Rava's opinion, that you're never allowed to bring something that's mazik near your friend's property, even if you come first. So it doesn't matter. You always have to distance yourself. So then, so then what are we talking about over here when we're saying that one tells the other that you're close and therefore you have to move away? The one that has the mustard seeds is saying to the one that has the bees, why did you bring your bees so close to my property? You're demanding for me to move away. You should be the one moving away. How does this whole conversation begin, Bichlal? According to Rava, anytime you have anything that could be mazik, and according to Rabbi Yossi, both chardal is mazik the bees, and the bees is mazik the mustard. They could be mazik each other. So either way, even if you're coming first, you're going to have to distance automatically. So then what's this lashon that he's saying that you should be moving away? That you can't demand from me to move away. You should be moving away. And so the Gemara answers, here is where Rav Papa said his answer. Omar Rav Papa, so Rav Papa answers, B'lekeach. That over here, what happened was that first, the one that planted his mustard seeds, he planted it there because it was all his property. The whole thing, the whole area belonged to him. And Elamai, then he split the property and he sold part of the property to someone else. And now this other person comes and is bringing bees over there to produce honey. And over here, it's in this case that Rabbi Yossi is saying that I put here my chardal, I was allowed to put my chardal here, it was all my property. And now after that, even though his chardal is damaging the bees that the buyer put there, but he can say, the one that has the chardal can say, your bees are also damaging my chardal. That's the case that we're talking about over here. So this explains how lechatchila it was possible that he put the mustard seeds near the border of his friend. Because lechatchila owned the whole area. So, but the Gemara asks on this, but if that's what we're talking about, so seemingly the whole Bryce here doesn't make sense. If we're talking about a case that the person, the one that has now the bees, the reason why your mustard seeds are right near his property is because he bought from you after you had the permission to put your mustard seeds there. It was all your property. If that's the case, then my time of the Rabbanon. Why would the Rabbanan say that the one that has the mustard seeds there has to move away from the bees because it's mazik the bees? Why should he have to move away? I was allowed to put it here. This was all my property. I put it here beheter. And furthermore, the Gemara asks, the question also is on Rabbi Yossi. V'oi, my time of the Rabbi Yossi, what's the reason that Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yossi came and argued only regarding the chardal and the dvairim, regarding the mustard seeds and the bees? Over there, Rabbi Yossi said that in this case specifically, just like the mustard seeds causes damage to the production of the honey, so to the bees cause a damage to the mustard seeds. That's what Rabbi Yossi argues. So the Gemara asks, but afila mishra v'yarkanami, even regarding the previous case in the Braise, Rabbi Yossi should have argued there as well, that if I put my flax here, to soak my flax in this area, and I was allowed to put it there, because it was all my property, and only afterwards that I split it and sell half to you, so Rabbi Yossi should argue and say, if that's the case, the one that has the flax shouldn't have to move away at all, because he had the right beheter to put it there, l'chatchila, it was all his property. So why is he only arguing regarding the case of the chardal and dvairim? He's pointing out that over there they're mazik each other. You don't need that reason. He had the right to put it because it was all his in the beginning. So Ravina explains the machlokes as follows: Kasavri Rabbanan's opinion is ala mazik laharchik esatzmai. Rabbanan hold that even in a case where you had the right to put it there, like we said, this was all your property in the beginning, and therefore the place where you planted your chardal was not on the border of your friend's property. You had the right to put it there. Again, according to Rava, if there was a border here, you don't have the right to you're not allowed to be saimich. Even if you're first, you're not allowed to put it there. But even if it was l'chatchila all your property and you had the right to put your chardal there, but now that you split it and you sold half to someone else, now you are being mazik his property, so then you're going to have to be marchik. You're going to have to move away, even if you came there l'chatchila beheter. That's what the Rabbanan hold. So now the Gemara asks on this. So if so, The klal, from this we understand that Rabbi Yosi Savar, that what's Rabbi Yosi's opinion in such a case? Ala nizik laharchik esatzmai. Rabbi Yosi is coming and arguing and saying, you're telling me that the basis of the opinion of the Rabbanan is that even though you came there beheter, but the fact is, now you're damaging your friend's property that's near you, so you're going to have to move away. So Rabbi Yosi disagrees with that. Rabbi Yosi seemingly is arguing and holds that in such a case, the nizik, the one that gets damaged, he has to move away. You're the one that came here beheter first, so he's the one that has to move away. But if that's the case, we're back to the question that we asked before. Why is Rabbi Yosi only arguing on the case of the honey and the mustard seeds? If Rabbi Yosi holds that the nizik is the one that has to move away, so that even in the first cases of this Mishnah, Rabbi Yosi should be arguing as well and saying that when you put your Mishra there, you put your flax there beheter, so now the nizik, the one that gets damaged, has to move away. Why is he only arguing in the case where he points out that they're being mazik each other? It's not because they're being mazik each other. The point is that you came here beheter, so therefore the nizik is the one that has to move away. He should be arguing on the whole entire halacha of the Tanakama. So Ella, the Gemara answers and explains as follows: La'olam, Rabbi Yosi nami ala mazik svirale. Rabbi Yosi agrees to the premise of what the Tanakama says, that the mazik has to be marchik himself. In this case, even though the mazik came there beheter, but nevertheless the mazik has to be marchik himself. But over here, what Rabbi Yosi is saying to the Rabbanon is as follows: Tainach mishra v'yarke dahani maski hani v'hani lamaski hani. In the case of soaking your flax here or putting your leek here, so over there it's taka true that your flax or your leek damages the other person's vegetables. So therefore we say you're the mazik and you're the one that has to move away, even though you came here beheter. But when it comes to the mustard seeds and the bees, tarvayu maskia adodi. In this case, they're being mazik each other. Why are you saying that I'm the mazik if at the same time your bees are eating up my seeds as well? That's why he's arguing in this case. Now, why did the Rabbanan disagree with that? The Rabbanan actually say, no, it doesn't work that way. The bees, they actually do not damage the mustard seeds. And he explains why not. If it's the seeds that you're worried that the bees will eat up the seeds, the bees don't find the seeds. The seeds are covered inside the plant that the bees can't access them. If it's the leaves or the flowers or the leaves that the bees come and eat, they grow back. It's not an issue. It doesn't ruin the mustard. So therefore, the Rabbanan disagree and say that the case of the bees and the mustard seeds is the same like the previous cases, where it's clear who's the mazik and who's the nizik. That's the explanation of the machlokes here. But on this, the Gemara asks, so what are we saying here? The premise of this whole discussion, both Rabbanan and Rabbi Yosi hold that anytime you have a situation where one is mazik the other in properties, so the mazik is the one that has to move away. But the Gemara, is this true? Is this Rabbi Yosi's opinion that when you're planting something in your property, Elamai could then later cause damage to your neighbor, that it's the mazik that has to move away? But Vatnan, we learned, Rabbi Yosi has a different approach regarding this. Rabbi Yosi says, that even if your neighbor first dug a pit and you're coming afterwards and digging a tree, so he already had his pit there, and now you're coming and planting a tree that the roots are going to spread and ruin the walls of his pit. Lo yakutz, you don't have to cut down your tree, because this one digs a pit in his property, you plant a tree in your property, and he can't demand of you to move away your tree. I explained this yesterday, that Rabbi Yosi's opinion in general in this whole perek is ala nizik laharchik esatzmai, that if I'm doing something in my property, and when I'm doing it, it's not causing a direct damage, which is what's called giddy delay, when I'm like throwing an arrow and directly damaging you. But I'm planting a tree here now. Elamai, over time, maybe a year later, my roots will reach to your boer and will damage the walls of your boer. Then Rabbi Yosi says, the nizik is the one. If you have a problem, you have to move away. The one that's planting the tree doesn't have to move away. So over here as well, how can we say that the premise of Rabbi Yosi's opinion is that he holds the same like the Rabbanon, that the mazik has to move away? Elamai, Rabbi Yosi is questioning the Rabbanon. Why are you saying that the Dvairim are getting damaged from the Chardal? Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the Chardal is getting damaged by the Dvairim. But it's not true. Rabbi Yosi doesn't hold to this whole thing, Bichlal. Okay, So the Gemara explains it's true and a chanami. So here, let's see how the Gemara explains this. Elo lo'olam, you're right. Rabbi Yosi ala nizik svirele. Rabbi Yosi's own opinion. Rabbi Yosi would disagree with the whole thing that the Rabbanan said it. That the Rabbanan is saying that the mazik is the one that has to move away, even when it's not causing a direct and immediate damage. Rabbi Yosi disagrees with this whole thing. Why is Rabbi Yosi only arguing regarding the case of the bees and the mustard seeds? Because all the Rabbanan ka'amalahu. Rabbi Yosi is arguing in the Rabbanan, even you, according to your opinion. Lididi, Rabbi Yosi is saying, according to my opinion, it's always the one that gets damaged, it has to move away. So therefore, even in the first case that the Rabbanan said that the one with the flax has to move away because it's damaging the other person's vegetables, Rabbi Yosi disagrees. Rabbi Yosi says, no, if you're getting damaged, your vegetables are getting damaged, you move away, not the one that's damaging. Elo, however, what Rabbi Yosi was saying is, Lididchu amrisu ala mazik. You're saying that the one that damages has to move away. So tainach mishra v'yarke. That's true in the case of the flax and the vegetables. The one that is soaking his flax is clearly the one that's damaging the vegetables, not the other way around. The hani maski hani v'hani le maski hani. The one with the flax is damaging. The one with the vegetables is not damaging. But when it comes to the mustard seeds and the bees, tavaya maski yahadadi. They're both being mazik each other. So why are you saying that the one with the mustard seed should move away? Maybe the one with the bees should move away. And the Rabbanan answer to that, as we explained before already, the Rabbanan say that no, the bees do not damage the mustard seeds. It's only the mustard seeds that damage the production of the honey. Because if it's the seeds, the bees cannot access the seeds, and if it's the leaves of the mustard seeds, it grows back, so therefore it doesn't damage it. That's the pshat in this machlekes. As you can see here, there's a lot of big places in here. This sugya is known as sugya the chardal, and the Rishonim here have a field day. Many different ways how to explain this Gemara. We explained this according to Rashi, the simple pshat of the Gemara, but this is a very famous sugya the chardal. Okay.